Are there new people here for the first time? You're probably going to wish you didn't raise your hand. Can I start? Hello. Welcome. I started out of my house tonight around 5:30 to do some things to come here. And I thought, who in their right mind would come out on a night like tonight? So I was really worried about the turnout. And now I want to say thank you for coming out on a night like tonight and staying with this effort that we've started. And tonight's going to be a little bit different of an agenda. I'll go over that in a minute. But we don't have a guest speaker tonight, so you're going to have to put up with me for about 15 or 20 minutes before we get into the committee report outs. Because I want to talk a little bit about where we are 6 months later. First of all, I've already said this, but on behalf of Don Keelan, who's here from the Keelan Foundation, Florence Belknap, who could not make it tonight from Mac Molding, and Don Chip Kendall, the owner of Mac Molding, who have been supporting our efforts. They wanted to make sure I said thank you to all of you. Because I don't think when we started this conversation in March of 2017 that we would have thought as a group that we would have this type of participation consistently and the good work that's going on inside the committees. So on behalf of them, I want to thank you for that. And then I want to remind you of why we started on this journey. You know, when we did the kickoff meeting and I had some opening comments about where we were going, you know, the theme wasn't that the town was broke or that there was these serious issues. We had this serious thing happen. We lost Mrs. Jones in January of 2017. And, you know, it really hit the town, but it was kind of the tipping point for a conversation that was going on below the surface for the period of time. And if I had to talk about this, again, I would say that it really doesn't, and the more I've read about this since I've become involved, and if you follow the news in Vermont, there is not a town in Vermont that isn't having the same conversation we're having. You know, I just, Fairhaven, just talked about a grant where they just got a grant to talk about future planning of how to draw more businesses to the downtown. Just one small example. The opiate issue and the issues around poverty and how it ties into education and the focus on education right now with Secretary Holcomb leaving her job and where's Act 46 and 49 is going to go. That was at the core of what we talked about going back to September 22nd of last year. And that conversation really centers around what's going on in the country. You know, small communities like ours across the country are struggling, trying to re-identify what their identity is and what their future is. And so that was the conversation we had. And, you know, people, you know, as I said earlier to a couple folks, I stole this tagline from my days in Rutland. You know, we talked about the collaboration for the better good. That everything that we do here is collaboration with existing institutions, the select board, the school board, and how we can collaborate with them for the greater good of the community and the surrounding area. And we spoke about focusing on strengthening our institutions and that social fiber that runs through a community and leveraging our assets to include the goodness of people who live here. And so I think, again, as I went through my comments today, to create my comments for tonight, it reminded me again, and I'll touch on this in a minute, about John Warner's speech that he gave on November 7th and how timely that is. And since then, we've lost that goodness of John Warner. And he talked about what he loved about Arlington and what was important to him about leaving behind. And he talked about the people in Arlington. It goes back to this piece about improving the quality of life and the well-being of the community. You know, that original focus on collaboration with the school board resulted in us working with them over the summer, even before announcing the formation of the Arlington Renewal project, working with the school board on a SWOT analysis of the strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats, and then quickly standing up a school committee led by Dr. Sherman that created the self-study report that went to the state on behalf of the school board. And that was impactful. Not everybody agreed with what came out of that, but it was impactful in the sense that the community spoke about what they valued about their school. We chose to focus on the positive, the town history, the arts, the beauty, its people. And, you know, we from the get-go wanted to be guided by positive energy, not negative energy. Not focusing on what's negative, but what's positive, and trying to figure out how we can build on that positive synergy to make our community a better place. Not only for us, but for people who may decide to move from Bennington, or where's my friend Lori Glover from Florida, or my other friend Holly from New Jersey. What's good about the community that draws people here that want to be part of this community that's vibrant? So the focus on what I was going to say, I said this earlier, I reviewed the GNet. Here's a little plug for GNet, okay? I reviewed the GNet video of John Warner's presentation on the 7th. And as we talked that night, John was part of our social fiber in the community that bound us together. You know, we lost a piece of that fiber when John passed here a month ago. That's a huge loss for us. And the only way to honor John Warner's contribution to the community is keep moving forward and keep doing what John talked about that night. And so let me remind you of how John started his comments. He walked up to the podium and this is what he said. This is a direct quote. "I love this town called Arlington." That's what he said. And he said he loved the beauty, the people, the spirit, and the rec park. He talked about the rec park. You know, and when I talk about the rec park now, I refer to that part of the rec park that's now the Warner Field, and the history that John put forth on that field, which is that social fiber that we talk about in the community. He spoke about a lot, but there's one point he made that when he was talking about the installing of the lights at the rec field, it was 1990 when those lights went in, 27 years ago. And he made reference to Todd Wilkins being on the soccer team, and my son Jay being on the soccer team at the time, and his son J.K. Warner playing on the soccer field at the time. And he talked about how he had this dream about installing the lights at the field, and he had this dream that it would bring life to the community, and it would bring people to the community at night to watch soccer games, and that was his dream. So the question I leave with, after I got done watching the video this afternoon, was I'm thinking about what is our dream for our town. And I think 6 months into this, and sitting here tonight and looking out on this cold, rainy, would have been a lot easier to stay home in front of the fireplace, that people came out. What is the dream for the community? What is it that we want in our community collectively that's that collaboration for the greater good? And how can we manage that? And how can we continue working towards that? We made a lot of progress. And so let me just run through some of the progress. The collaboration with the school board and the select board. Keith and I spent another hour or so again yesterday talking about where we are and how we can collaborate better with the board. That's a big step forward. This is a citizen group that's formed, and again, if you're in an institutional setting such as a select board or a school board, it can easily be a threat to you as an individual and institution. And both the school board and the select board have supported us, and I continue to talk with Keith on a regular basis, and I continue to talk with Bill Basic and Nicole at the school on a regular basis. We've been honest about our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We've been very honest in our conversations about that, and I think that's a big deal. The school committee, I already touched on it. The self-study report took a lot of energy. It took a lot of work. It's now in the hands of the state, and now it's up to the state to decide, do we stay as a supervisory union? But I think we made one hell of a pitch about what we have for assets in this town and why we think we're unique compared to other towns and supervisory unions around the state. We've improved our communications with email list, use of social media, and development of flow of information through the chairs. The chairs, I find, I get information out, they push them out to their committees, we get feedback. We started just yesterday the development of a professional web page to market and tell our story of Arlington area. And I want to call out, Carolyn's not here tonight, but Carolyn Blitz from Stratton Magazine and Manchester Life has volunteered her staff for free of charge to develop a web page for our efforts, which will be tied into the town. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes. We received 2 donations from foundations that were unsolicited. Now, why do I say unsolicited? Because somebody out there, these are 2 anonymous donations that have come in, a small amount of money for us to use, for people that believe in what we're doing. And I don't think there's, Don Keel and I were talking about this one day, I don't think there's a better way of validating what we're doing when people are willing to put their own money up from a foundation to give us resources to try to help what we're doing. That speaks very powerfully to what we're doing. And it's going to help us with a little bit of the web development, even though Carolyn and her staff are doing the development for free. We have to maintain that web page going forward. And we developed an administrative team to support me on project management, and Holly Backey and Lori Glover. They figured out by being around me that don't ask me to do an Excel spreadsheet. Don asked me to take a Word document today and turn it into PDF. I emailed him and said, I don't know how the hell to do that. So he emailed me. So he emailed you. And so we've developed this administrative support to be a little more efficient. And we've also developed a grant team that's starting to take a look at grants, to focus on certain projects in town and looking at grants. Here's a little bit of taking a peek at the future, moving forward from this day forward, moving into the second 6 months of where we're at. The chairs will talk about some of this in a few minutes, but when they talk about what they've set for their goals within their committees, step back for a minute and take stock of some of the conversations. Some of these conversations haven't been easy, and the chairs have spent a lot of time working with their committees. Conversations about, and I talked to Keith about this yesterday, about the potential for a recommendation coming for a rec director for the community. Somebody that would coordinate recreation and activities in the community. We're talking about investing. There's investors that we're having conversations with that are talking about potentially becoming involved in purchasing rundown houses and fixing up houses and making them affordable for families to come and move to Arlington. Now, it's a little early in this process to talk about details, but there are folks that are interested in making that kind of investment in our community. The town committee, and Todd will talk about this in a little while, are ready to make another presentation to the select board on the pros and cons of moving forward with a town administrator. Working on a summer plan to do some banners and flowering on Main Street in an impactful way, in anticipation of the Four Freedoms Festival coming to Arlington. And I know Josh will probably touch on this when he reports out in his committee later. We're moving forward with the conversation, and hopefully by the time the Warner soccer tournament happens, Todd, in September, correct? That this will be in place, but putting a memorial stone with the history of John Warner, with John's picture at the rec field. And it'll be dedicated during the Warner soccer tournament. Because again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. You can't forget people like John Warner and what that fiber was in the community. 20 years from now, we don't want somebody pulling into town, seeing a sign up that says Warner Field, and somebody doesn't know the history of John Warner and what he gave to this community. We've been asked by the school to appoint reps as a subcommittee of the school board. They're beginning to work on a strategic plan for school marketing and increasing the number of students at the school through that marketing effort. And we've been asked as the Renewal project to recommend certain, give names. Some people in the room I've talked to already. There's a couple in here I need to talk to tonight about potentially participating in that. And finally, we're now ready for a master strategic plan based on the good work of the committees, which will be a guiding document for us, which I hope to have done sometime within the next month and a half. So what I would say to you is that, again, a lot of good work has gone on. It may not be apparent right now, but I'm the ultimate optimist, and I think we're on a tipping point of seeing some stuff come to bear fruit. And there's great conversations, activities, and projects beginning to take shape. And I think the biggest question is, what is the dream? What is the dream? And so if you can dream, we can get it done if we work collectively together. So let me do this. Let me open up to questions. If people have questions about what I talked about, where we are. I just thought, in light of the fact that we didn't schedule a guest speaker tonight, that it would be a good opportunity to go over where we are and what we've done. And try to keep you all engaged in the process as we continue to make progress on some of the projects. Questions or questions about what I talked about that I can answer? Where we are and where we're going. Okay, that's good. I like no questions. So let's do this. Maybe Todd, would you like to start first? So if you would like, the only thing I would ask is when I ask the chairs to come up, if you can come here, because Jeanette's microphone is here, and it becomes very difficult to pick up over there. So if you would want to update folks on the town committee stuff first.
So I have the pleasure of chairing the town governance committee. And what this committee chose to take on primarily to start was a town administrative position. We felt that the town of Arlington is growing significantly, especially with the water department now taking over the rec park, as well as other great things like the Benton Hill Health Clinic has come into town, things like that. Our town is growing. And we believe that the responsibilities put on the select board are also growing. So why not add some support to them and support to the community members by looking into this. This was studied back in 2010. Prior to this, presented to the town. A non-binding vote was put in 2011. I think it lost by roughly 14 votes, 15 votes, somewhere in that area. So we took another hard look at that. We invited Kevin Daly in to talk to us. He was one of the original people who did the study. He came in and spent a couple hours with us, and it was a fantastic meeting. In fact, the conversation was so good, he has come back to kind of join our group. Our group has grown. Holly came the last time, and it continues to grow with even more people. On top of that, we brought in David Kiernan, who is the town administrator in Shaftesbury. We felt it was a close community, similar demographics, similar in population. They're a little bit bigger than we are, a little bit not only in population but also in geography. He was a wealth of information. He also spent 2 hours with us. We planned on maybe half an hour and ended up being 2 hours. From that, we have gathered a pile of data and information on this particular position. What we're working on currently is a list of pros and cons. And then after that, we will be working on cost. David Kiernan certainly helped us with that, but we need to dig deeper into the cost of what it'll cost the taxpayers and things like that, as well as what are some potential offsets to offset that cost. Our next meeting is April 26th. At that meeting, I've asked everybody in our group to come with their list of pros and cons so that we can start establishing that. Our goal and intent here is to eventually, probably within the next couple months, have a full presentation for the select board to see what we've come up with, because at the end of the day, the select board are the folks that make that decision, not us. We would certainly, after presenting it to the select board, like to present it to the community, hopefully with the select board's blessing, so they can see what we came up with, and we will have not only the pros and cons of it, but also the dollars and cents of it for you, because at the end of the day, that's really what rules the roost, is the dollars and cents. So that's where we're at. We've also looked into some ordinances, ordinance enforcement, things like that, but our primary goal has really been to focus on that town administrative position. Okay? Questions for our group? Fantastic.
Can I just add one thing?
Sure.
From the group, I guess, the presentation, I was very impressed by it. But at least his position, the administrator's position, was that the grants that he was able to get and bring into the town offset his salary.
Yep.
So I just wanted to make the point, it's not just about generating revenue, but he, in his position at least, was able to offset his salary through the grants.
Yeah, I mean, some of the highlights, just to hit, I don't want to take up too much time, but just to hit on some of the highlights from David Kiernan. David has been in Shaftesbury since 2015. He, in his time there, even though he has, I think from 2016 to the current budget, their budget's actually gone down $8,000. On top of that, they're building a brand new town garage. They're adding money into their parks and recs and to include new wells, things like that. So there's a lot of very significant town improvements that are going on along in decreasing the budget at the same time. Not to say our select board certainly can't do that, but we're asking folks that are donating their time to do the job of a full-time individual. In David's case, he works full-time, 40 hours a week, salary. It's his job to run the town, and he does, from what we have learned, he does a good job. And obviously, if we bring someone like David, with David's capabilities, I think that we could see some of those same benefits to it. But we're not finished with our study yet, so we'll see where we're at the end of it. Thanks.
So we've been chairing the Economic Development Committee, and we've had a lot of really exciting meetings talking about some just really huge things that we could do that would be, wonderful. But when it comes down to it, we really feel that for economic development for Arlington, our first focus is focusing on our local businesses and helping to support them and trying to figure out ways to support them. So our first initiative is going to be to host a community celebration on May 12th here at the Legion with the Julie Shea Band in order to kind of bring the community, all the community, but with a focus on business community here, to gather people's names, to do a survey about what do the local businesses need, what would help them be more successful, and to maybe do a job bank. Like we personally know that finding help is very difficult, and so we'll tell the businesses to bring their business cards, bring their job offerings, really make it a fun but also hopefully productive event. So that's our first thing, and then from that, hopefully we will have some more concrete activities that we're going to work on from our survey, including putting together a business directory of businesses in our area and putting it on the website that the ladies are working on.
I think to add to that, to identify what business and commerce resources exist in our community and how do we continue to support them. We used to have a Chamber of Commerce that kind of united people. We don't have a chamber anymore, but I think we believe strongly in the value of networking amongst our community and expressing the value of keeping your business local. It supports your community. And then we also are trying to determine exactly what economic development means to Arlington and how do we measure economic development or a lack thereof. So we're trying to figure out how to self-evaluate the work that we're doing. So, anybody have any questions? Matt?
Can you tell me quickly, Amy, the event was on?
May 12th.
And the hours?
7 to 10.
I noticed that Ludlow, Killington, Brandon, and Manchester, just to pick 4 towns at random, have an economic development committee as a subcommittee of the select board. Is that something that you're going to look into? Because something to go forward beyond the like of this Arlington renewal.
I almost think that might be a conversation to have with Todd's committee at some point. One of the things that Jim's alluded to is that through these presentations, we'll find out that there's cross-pollination between the committees, and perhaps after they've addressed the administrative part, then we can expand the conversations we're more than willing to have. Sure. Okay, good.
Thank you. So I want to just say this about the economic development piece. Anybody that knows businesses in town, urge them to get involved with Amy and Alan's work. Like all the committees, they've worked very hard, but it's kind of an interesting situation in Arlington. Amy had told me at one point there's like 800 LLCs registered with the state in the town of Arlington. So a lot of those are hidden businesses. But as Alan at ChemClean talks to people that come through, a lot of times business folks are 1- and 2-person operations, and they really don't want any more business. But this isn't just about creating more business. It's about networking, knowing what the assets of your town are. And so, again, they originally thought about a mixer like on a weekday night, where we would try to bring businesses in like on a Wednesday, and through some great brainstorming they turned this into this community-wide celebration that we, as kind of the tip of the spear of the project, are supporting their efforts. So I think this is an opportunity for us to have a great community celebration. And really, when you talk about local business and supporting local business, Julie Shea in her other life is a local business. She's got quite a following as a band, but she's somebody local. And so we're supporting that local to local business in this process and part of that theme. And there'll be a part of that theme that night where we're going to ask people to bring a donation to the food shelf. Right? So again, it's supporting for the greater good, this collaboration for the greater good. So collaborating for the greater good by having this celebration that turns into hopefully support for the food shelf as well. So anyway, again, I'm trying to drive home collaboration for the greater good. Who would like to go next? Alex?
Sure. So I'm Alex Burke, Chair of the Public Safety Committee. Jim talked earlier about the SWOT analysis that we're doing as a whole, looking at our strengths and weaknesses. And some of our strengths are our public safety organizations here, our fire rescue folks. So our committee is made up mainly with fire rescue folks, and we are looking at how to improve what are already good services. So one of the ways in which we're looking at that is the recruitment efforts of the organizations to try and bring in new and younger folks into those organizations to help maintain those services going forward into the future. So part of our focus is focusing in on that aspect of it, and specifically bringing in high school kids, starting the recruitment drive early to bring new blood into the organizations to maintain them going forward. And that's one aspect of what we're looking on. Side aspect of that is taking a look at the specific buildings and facilities for those two organizations and trying to evaluate if there's any ways to improve that. This is the beginning of the conversation within the committee, so we haven't talked a lot about that, but that is a focus that we are intending to look into. Some of the other areas that we are looking into are looking at the speed limit on Main Street to see, at least evaluate or look to evaluate whether there's any benefits in trying to reduce that as we come down through town, which would tie into bringing people into the town to see our great businesses, our arts community. Again, this is beginning aspects of that approach. And the other aspect that we're looking at is frankly part of a larger conversation that's going across the nation, which is public safety in the schools. There's been many news stories that have brought that conversation to the forefront, which has brought it to the forefront in our committee as well. Looking at the availability of school resource officer in our schools here, which we currently don't have. Some of the other schools in the county do. So approaching that and seeing where we could go for that, as well as just generally school safety, which would tie into several different committees as well. But those are the areas that we are looking into right now. Any questions?
Thanks, Alex. Josh? So while Josh is coming up here, Josh, I had a conversation the other night, and this will probably be your last official role as chair of the school committee. Josh did yeoman's work leading this group that did the self-study. And again, if you haven't seen this, it's on the school webpage. You should take a look at it because it talks about the future of our school here in Arlington. And so Josh put a lot of work into that. And what we asked Josh the other night to do, I think we have to reconstitute a new school committee because it took a lot of energy to do that. And quite candidly, it also, not everybody was in agreement. And sometimes it's probably good to put together a new committee under the school to focus on the Act 77 piece, working with the school, and the marketing piece. And Josh is going to step down to help Clint Dickens with the arts. And so Josh will report out on the school, maybe touch on the 4 freedoms a little bit.
Hi, everyone. First of all, it was a great honor to serve as the chair of the school committee because I come from a family that really stressed education as being something of importance, and that education is not something that just happens at school, but also at home. It happens within the community, and it was incredibly not just refreshing, but inspiring to actually work with a group of neighbors and friends and new friends to sort of figure out where do we go from here? How can we best support the next generation? And I think that we got a lot of feedback in a lot of different directions, but I think ultimately everyone had the best interests of the students at mind. You know, everyone was really trying to figure out. Parents came to us and said, we love the small class size, we want more options. You know, people really needed help in understanding the difference between the Arlington School District and the BVSU, which is the supervisory union. There were a lot of different hurdles, but ultimately, as Jim said, we did really look at what are the strengths of our town, what are the realities of our school system within the state, and how can we best justify not just keeping our school alive, but keeping our school excellent. And I say that intentionally, keeping our school excellent. This was not at any time a criticism of the school itself. This was actually a moment where we all sort of reflected and said, we think we have something special here, and how are we going to protect it now and in the future? And for those of you who haven't read it or have not been able to view us on GNAP before, the main focus was really recognizing that there's a tremendous history and rich legacy of the arts in Arlington with Norman Rockwell and 4 other Saturday Evening Post illustrators, Don Trachty, and several other artists in this community, that it made sense to really continue to focus on the arts. And then, of course, with MAC as the 2nd largest manufacturer in Vermont, being just around the corner from here, that we have a tremendous opportunity to connect the arts and sciences and give focus. Part of the discussion was really also on the trades. I personally know from the projects we're doing in East Arlington, we have incredibly talented, skilled workers here within the trades, within town. But it's important to sort of help with creating pathways for our students. And that doesn't start in high school. It has to start earlier, and that was part of our recommendation, was to really try and look at those options so that every kid, and I guess by the time they graduate high school, they're no longer kids, but that every senior or every teenager in Vermont, the goal of Act 77 was that every teenager in Vermont should have a goal. They should see the future. They should know where they want to go to next, whether that is college, whether that is work, whether that is travel. Whatever it is, the goal is for them to know where to next. And I think that the whole point of this discussion is really us looking at Arlington, not just at the school system, but the larger town, where to next. So with that in mind, it is not a, Jim thanked me for my work on the school committee, but really it's my thank you to you as a community, and to you out there, anyway, to you viewers at home, it really was a great honor to serve on the committee, and thank you for that. And I completely agree with Jim that it's time to bring in some other voices, some other opinions, take a look at what was done, what's happening now and what can change. There's a lot of change going on these days, not just in the school system, but everywhere, so in the government. So let's try and, I strongly encourage anyone out there who cares about education, who has a background in education, who maybe doesn't have a background in education, but has an opinion on it based on their kids, or the difficulty in hiring workers, or what you find in the workplace. Anyone interested should really volunteer and be a part of this, because it is worthwhile. That's not a word that we hear often these days, but worthwhile. It's worth the time, it's worth the effort. Switching subjects, as Jim alluded, I will be very involved in the Arts Committee. As many of you know, yes, I'm a practicing physician in Bennington, but also have a strong background in the arts. And this summer, we are actually connecting arts, history, and really focusing on a great celebration for Arlington. This is the 75th anniversary of the publishing of the original Four Freedoms by Norman Rockwell. The original paintings actually were inspired by an Arlington town meeting, not unlike this one. And I think that it's very exciting that we're going to be hosting a celebration. The entire month of July is really becoming a month of freedom, similar to the Thanksgiving to Christmas month, where we think of it as the holiday season. We're really looking at the entire month of July as an opportunity for Arlington to connect with its neighbors in Bennington and Manchester and create a regional Four Freedoms Festival. We hope to make this an annual event. This is the first annual inaugural Four Freedoms Festival. And at a moment in time when #MeToo and Time's Up are so prevalent, where we are, I think that freedom of speech, freedom from want, freedom from fear, and freedom of religion are more present than ever. The Mill in East Arlington is going to be hosting a series of events, both here in Arlington as well as in Bennington and Manchester. You can go to the website and get all the updates on the schedule, www.themillvt.com. themillvt like Vermont.com. And you'll see a whole drop-down box that has a full schedule of events for the Four Freedoms Festival. Don Tracty will be headlining Don Tracty Jr., I should say, will be headlining the Arlington Models Reunion, which will be on July 7th this year at the high school. And that really is sort of the kickoff event for the Four Freedoms Festival, which will then be going the next few weeks. The official festival weekend is July 20th, 21st, 22nd, which is intentionally coincides with the Arlington Fire Department Carnival, which is their big fundraiser of the year. And you'll see once again that we're really working together. As I mentioned, cross-pollination, cross-promotion. I just call it working together to really create some great events that are meaningful. And this actually goes back, and I'll wrap it up. If any of you do have kids or grandkids out there who are in 9th through 11th grade, there is a contest going on right now called the Create for Freedom Contest. It is, the deadline for submissions is April 30th. It's an art and poetry contest where we essentially are challenging 9th, 10th, and 11th graders to figure out, why is freedom of speech relevant? Why does freedom from fear still matter? And similar to Rockwell, who was able to capture those four freedoms in single images, we're now challenging our teenagers to do the same. So there are cash prizes. There will be an exhibition of the work at the Southern Vermont Arts Center, and the winners will actually get published in one of the magazines that Jim alluded to earlier. So it's a pretty big, heady prize for teenage artists and poets out there. So please encourage everyone to participate. Thank you.
And again, Josh, a little round of applause for Josh. Again, stepping down from the chair of the school committee to work on the arts. Again, I can't overemphasize the work that went into that self-study report. It was huge. So, Clint, would you like to come up and talk about, on the heels of that, come up and talk about the Arts Committee?
Josh's explanation. What I have to say seems to be a little, what would be the word? It doesn't hold the stature of the four freedoms, let's just say that. But I will say that I first became acquainted with the Four Freedoms many years ago. A band by the name of Norman Rockwell, who has a little studio over here in Arlington and used to hire people to come and paint. And I came in and we kind of revitalized that, and now it was called In on Cover Bridge Green, and no one really knew what that was. So we recently changed it to the Norman Rockwell Studio and Inn. And in that process, I had the opportunity to meet some amazing people. And I just, for a moment, for me, I feel humbled by the people that are representing you. And I just wanted you to know, the people that are here that are the chairman. This man, when he first spoke the first time I heard him, and I have a background in law enforcement, and I tend to idolize, Marines and stuff like that. But when he spoke, he struck me with the idea that what happens in our community, whether it's a young man who does something that was horrific and cost us all a lot of pain, to some degree we are all responsible for that. Somehow that falls on all of us. And for me, that was the thing that I said, okay, I want to be a part of this. And that's what you guys, when you become part of this, are becoming a part of. A real vitalization. My friend knew his own Wayside forever, and Don Trachty, a good friend of mine, who his father's story is amazing, and Amy, and all the people that are part of the community, Todd, and our attorney, and I mean, these are not lightweight people, guys. These are people that carry power and authority, and my friend Josh that we've gotten to know, and very excited by the way that you're coming aboard. I felt I was kind of floundering for a while. We didn't really seem to have a focus, but we do. And some of the things that are exciting that are coming out of it, I think, maybe not as big as the Four Freedoms, but we're looking at doing some things like being more visual. So we're bringing in some landscaping, possibly going on in Arlington. I was speaking today. She called me, one of the women from the Garden Club, and they're interested in how they might participate. And bringing in actually creating statues of some of Rockwell's paintings, and maybe not exactly the paintings, but doing things that represent what we have here. We are a culture here of artists and visionaries and people that saw the world in a different way than everyone else, and that still exists. We hear these horrific stories about what's going on in the world and our children protesting, and we think, what can we do? How can we, and I'm also an educator, how can we create a place where they can feel safe, where they know they're taken care of, where they have the idea of making a difference in the world, rather than leaving here and going other places. A lot of you, I remember raising hands once, and a lot of you said, how many people here have had children that grew up here? And a lot of hands went up. I think it was a Mac Molding meeting or something. And then they said, how many people of you still have those children here? Very few. Mine left. There was nothing for her to really do here that she could connect with. And that's one of the things that the economic department, the committee, and all these committees are trying to bring about. We ran into, for a while, a little bit of confusion. The winter was bad, and what I'm looking at is the renewal that comes with spring and what we're bringing. And I'm looking so forward to some of those things that are happening. Working with the school and creating some curriculum, bringing in some of the artists that are around here. The studio started this thing called the American Creator Seminars, and they're going to open it up to the community. We have people like Bob Stake, who's a world-renowned illustration artist and an amazing portrait artist, and all these people that are willing to come here and work with some of our kids and develop maybe a curriculum. We're going to be talking to that big school up there in Manchester, and they may be coming here because there's art and science and places that they can engage in that they won't find anywhere else because of people like all those that are sitting here. So I just wanted you to know that. You're not just joining a bunch of guys hanging out trying to make a difference. These are power hitters, and we have a focus, and we're going forward, and we want you to be a part of it because we really think all the wonderful things about Arlington, we're just going to make them that much better. So that's my little preachy sermon, but it's from the heart. And I feel incredibly honored to be in their presence. I couldn't really believe it when they asked me to be the head of the art committee. It's like, oh my goodness, you know. But I see the vision, and we want you to catch the vision and see what we're moving into, because we're going to change things. We're going to make things that are good even better. And I've heard people say, what's wrong with Arlington? It's great, you know. And I say things like, well, at one time there were 10 inns that were here, and there's 3 or 4 now. There was a big business over in East Arlington, and it's evaporated. You have people like Josh that are revitalizing that area. And if you don't get a chance, he's not just living, he's doing some really amazing things over there, changing and transforming. People like Don Keelan, who's kind of in the background, but has this energy and love for the people here. And I'm shutting up now. But I'm open, and I want to hear everybody's idea. If you know an artist who wants to come, if you have an idea of how we can use art to influence and trade, not only art, but the Green Mountain Boys used to bivouac out in front of my inn. And they used to come in, it was called Turner's Tavern. And I don't know how you verify this story, but the guy was he was a loyalist, and he decided that instead of getting tarred and feathered by the Green Mountain Boys, he put in a tavern. And so he did. So we have this amazing history that goes back for a couple of centuries, and we get to be a part of it. So thank you all very much.
So you'll be hearing more about, Clint and I had this conversation about a week and a half ago, you'll be hearing more about the potential for a flowering project similar to what Steve Costello talked about when he came down from Rutland Blooms. We're talking about a project similar to that under the Arts Committee. So again, you'll be hearing more about that in the very near future. Hooper. So I think you've got some guests with you as well. Yeah. So Hooper is the chair of the Rec and Activities Committee.
I'll go and introduce them, then you can.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we started out, and I first like to say I'd like to thank everybody on the committee. We started out really huge. I think there was 30 or so the first day. We're down to maybe 10 to a dozen, but we started with 3 or 4 big ideas, and I think now we're down to 2, but we're really ready to move forward with those 2. Mr. Baker mentioned the first one. We've got a plan for a rec director and activities director that'll work hopefully as an employee of the town, and will work planning stuff at the rec park and outside the rec park. We've located a couple of opportunities for generating some revenue to help fund that. Actually, just last week we got in touch with Southern Vermont College, who through there, they have a business administration with a focus on recreation and tourism. They think they can run much of that rec director through an internship program to help us and work with us, and that also gives us the opportunity to use the head of that department to help us with the planning and those pieces. So the plan there is to, in the very near future, have a discussion with the select board about how we go about instituting the rec director and how we could generate some revenue and help the town to get that in place. Much of this was driven by a survey that we put out. We had just over 200 respondents, and most of the discussion on the rec parks centered around the fact that people felt they would use the rec park more if there were planned opportunities. Many of them we're aware of. I think some of them we were kind of surprised by. People talking about if there was even just a schedule up of when people went walking on the path, we would be more apt to go because we could walk and chat with someone instead of when we go and walk alone. So those are some of the opportunities we have, and like I said, the rec director is sort of the main focus there, and hopefully within the next couple weeks we'll hear back Southern Vermont College and then get in to talk to the select board. The second one, Nikki's going to sort of present, came to us and deals with some opportunities outside the rec park.
I'm going to use you.
All right.
I've got to stand there, and the computer's over there.
Okay.
And so I'm going to have you scroll down.
Okay.
It's a PDF file. All right. So the Rec and Activities Committee broke off into subcommittees, one of which was to explore options and assets not located in the boundaries of the rec park. This is a result of that exploration, and we met with various groups and interested persons to begin putting together the pieces of the puzzle of what rec outside the park meant. I'm going to begin with thinking on the top level, talking about state things, working my way down. I kind of think in images, so that's kind of how my brain works. So if you can imagine putting together the pieces of a puzzle, maybe by the end of the slide you'll get the whole picture. So if you want to move to the next slide. Beginning at the state level, according to OutdoorIndustry.org, 72% of Vermont residents participate in outdoor recreation each year. VORREC is Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaboration that was initiated by the state, gathering resources and assets of the state to identify ways to promote economic development through recreation. Governor Phil Scott took those reports, and he came up with 3 initiatives. If you want to scroll to the next one. The 3 initiatives that came out of that is a pilot program for the Outdoor Recreation Friendly Town program, and that one, sorry, I lost my place, is to support communities in their efforts to grow local outdoor recreation economies. The program is supposed to provide resources to strengthen regional networks, connect local communities and businesses with trails and other outdoor recreation resources, and to promote outdoor recreation culture, lifestyle, and assets, as well as for data collection. The second initiative was for a new camping gear loan program to launch in 5 different state parks, designed to enable more Vermonters to enjoy Vermont's camping facilities. And the Department of Forests and Forest Parks and Recreation will manage the program in coordination with Outdoor Gear Exchange. The third initiative is a private sector-led initiative to create an outdoor business alliance. And this non-for-profit business organization will look to increase and expand the outdoor sector and support implementation of additional VORREC recommendations. At the same time, and the next slide, at the regional level, members of North Shire and South Shire collaborated with the VORREC initiative. They began meeting and beginning to figure out what the assets of the area were. They embraced the initiative and have a strong interest in promoting and even expanding the options for outdoor recreation for the Bennington County area. They made a list of all the current recreational assets, and they're moving forward to form a plan for themselves to work together to promote recreational opportunities in Bennington County. We are in the heart of Bennington County, the Shires. We are Arlington, Sunderland, and Sandgate, and this Arlington Renewal project fits really well into that. If you move to the next one, it talks about us here. We started at about the same time as all of this other stuff was happening, the Arlington Renewal project. And the Activities and Recreation Committee sent out a survey to the families of all the Arlington and Sunderland schools and made paper copies available. As Cooper had said, we received over 200 responses. This survey said 80% use those walking trails. And the survey showed that parents and students are interested in having more opportunities for walking, hiking, and outdoor adventure outside the park as well. So those are all of our pieces. We look at rec outside the rec park, and we start thinking about hiking, walking, cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, mountain biking. Hopefully now you're starting to think of how you have recreation and what you do in town. Maybe you have something that will be added to this list. I'm not sure. But this is just the beginning of thinking outside of the park. Here's where our connections start to happen. The Conservation Fund is a national organization. It acquires land with a partner in mind to work for conservation and economic benefits to local communities. In 2017, the Conservation Fund acquired 23,000 acres in New York, Massachusetts, and Vermont. They are not permanent holders of the land. They work with partners to then transfer ownership to those partners. Next slide. We have an opportunity. The Conservation Fund, when they purchased those lands, did not have a cooperative buyer in mind. Those lands are called the COE lands. I don't know if you have heard about them in the news, but for Vermont, they do not have a partner as of yet. The goal is to match that land with whoever best fits their conservation goals in combination with economic and local community benefits. The Conservation Fund works with the buyer to create a plan, helps raise funds needed for the purchase, and they want to work with the community. And this opportunity became our main focus since it's actually a limited time offer. Next picture is the picture of the first property of land called the Murray property. It is about 3,000 acres. It abuts the Green Mountain National Park lands on the bottom south end of Arlington. And that shared border could allow for continuity of public land use. There has been talk at the regional level of a desire for a tectonic ridge trail system, similar to what's the Appalachian Trail system. And in order to have that happen, they would need to have continuity throughout. This is a huge piece and could be a huge asset. The next one is the Red Mountain parcel, which is approximately 400 acres. It's kind of floating out there on its own, but I think locals have been aware of this land and used it recreationally in their local way. All right, so in the next slide, I'm just saying that in identifying our town's recreational needs and desires, we need to be a part of the discussion of these lands and how they fit our town's best interests. When we had this conversation in our subcommittee, we started having other questions that came up because these lands become more than just recreation. The questions came up, or the ideas that came up were, well, there's more that this land could offer than just recreation. How might we be able to offer new educational opportunities if we had access to this land? Maybe partnering with CDC to offer land management classes. Maybe our high school would have natural biology or conservation classes because we have a huge parcel to work with. Maybe additional trails will impact the bed and breakfasts, the inns, campgrounds seeking additional business. These lands could spur a new renewed interest in our town's recreational tourism. Someone or some group is going to be the owner of these lands. Our town has a unique opportunity right now to figure out how we are going to fit in with that. And I just wanted to leave that up to you guys and see if there are questions that I may be able to answer, or any thoughts and feedback. The coordinator or contact for the Conservation Fund is already in conversation with the select board, and she will be coming to talk with them again on April 23rd. So that's coming up soon. That's tentative. I just talked with her earlier today. But that's the idea. So we are also working with encouraging working with the select board on this. Any questions?
Didn't you say that this could be sustainably logged?
It is a COE lands were timber management lands, and it has been logged and can continue to be logged and sustain itself. Is that correct, Dave? Do you have any?
We believe so.
We believe so.
A lot more studies to that, but it could be, in essence, self-sufficient once the purchase price is.
Right.
I just had a question. I'm a little unclear. Are we talking about using current trails and existing trails, developing more access to these lands, or are we talking about promoting them more? It's like,
Well, as of right now, they need an owner. So a couple of ideas that could be open to the town is whether the town has the appetite for a town forest. That's one. The other option would be if we don't have an appetite for a town forest, we do have a vested interest in wanting to have access recreationally to those lands. What would those desires be, and how can we work with the Conservation Fund to meet those goals as they look for a different buyer if it's not the town?
you mentioned appetite for town forest. Will we be elaborating on that as we go along with that means exactly? Or?
Well, an appetite meaning whether the town, because this would be part of the select board and you know, making this decision as to whether we want to go through acquiring the lands. We don't have the cost right now. The Conservation Fund does work with the buyers for acquiring monies through various grants and other fundraising opportunities. But we need to know, we need to know whether this is something that the town is even interested in us continuing to pursue.
So when they use the term buyer, I mean, like, I can't just go to the Conservation Fund, I don't think, and say, hi, I'm Lori Glover, can I buy this forest? Is it each, oh, I can?
Yeah.
But I was, so in general, to the people or to the buyers, are these buyers, are they either towns or counties or not-for-profit organizations? I'm kind of not getting the sense.
Dave, do you have a response to that?
I think they are looking for somebody that is of conservation mind to protect these lands, but to encourage the use so that there is economic benefit throughout the town, whether it be recreational, whether it be economic. However, they want to see that it best fits the goals of the town as a whole.
Okay.
So can another timber management company go in there and put a bid on this? Sure. If that's their sole goal, they might not have the same priority ranking as another entity that has some other goals to align with it.
So the Conservation Fund is the one who decides who the buyer is?
Yeah, they are the landowner now. Yeah, so they are the driving force in what direction this land will go.
In the back.
Right, so I had two questions. Would there be restrictions on the use of the land? Just curious about that. And the second question would be, as more of an assumption, the money used to purchase land would then probably be used for them to purchase other land and protect that. So it's kind of a win-win, I think.
So as of right now, there are no restrictions on the land. They will be assessing the land. I'm not sure about how that all works. That is where Conservation Fund, when they come to talk with the town, would be able to answer more of those questions. I saw another hand.
Yeah, you raise a good point as far as investigating on whether the town is interested or not, because at one time the town did have a town forest.
We still do.
I thought that was sold years ago.
90 acres for one. There's still 90 acres for
I forgot. I also brought a map of it all.
It was kind of out of the way, I think, is one of the reasons when it was sold.
Yeah, that parcel is over here, I believe, that you're talking about. Am I right?
Yeah, you may want to just point out Route 7, 313, so people get a sense.
So this is 313. 7's going this way. I believe the town park that you're referring to, this town forest, is over here, I think. And then over here is another parcel of land. All of this is Green Mountain National Forest. And this is the parcel that is, one of the parcels that's in question, and this is the other parcel over here.
How's that accessed right now? Is it accessible?
Can you help me with the
Murray
names?
Hollow Road, to get to the
Murray Hollow Road, yeah.
parcel. And there is a right-of-way to the Red Mountain parcel, but it's not very usable. And I believe they have been accessing the property from, is it Mountain View? The very end of Mountain View, there's a logging road that goes in there.
The end, right at the end, the cul-de-sac at the end of Wilcox Road is.
Wilcox Road.
Right at the end of Wilcox is the access now.
Can you also access that larger property on the Hollow Road?
Yeah, you could.
I just hiked it when our last thaw. I hiked from my property because I can access it from my property all the way to Benedict Hollow Road. And there are some beautiful logging roads up there. Like, beautiful, like flat, wide.
Trail's already there.
Yeah, I mean, really, it was a gorgeous hike. And not a killer, and like really clear. As I was doing it, I was like, wow, it would take very little to turn these trails into very usable trails. I mean, very little marking to do it.
When I first met with the Conservation Fund, Donald Campbell from the Vermont Land Trust, and I sat down with them, and they made an emphasis on number one, the quality of some of the past timber projects that COE has done, and the condition and the investment that they made in those roads that Amy's talking about. And they would like to see that these lands eventually land in the ownership of an organization or individual who would maintain the working landscape aspect of the property. And as Dave said, a conservation-minded organization or individual. They're open to full discussion of entities. And if there's anybody here who's a member of one of the hunting clubs, whether it's the Murray Hollow Hunting Club or Beatty Hollow, because there's another parcel up in Rupert that's on this list of land. And that's where the Beatty Hollow Hunting Club is. They are going to continue those hunting leases for the next, I think she said 5 years, or until the property's sold. So you don't have to panic about that if you're a member.
Thanks. Any other questions?
I'm sorry, this was fascinating. Go ahead.
You had it.
I'm a little bit concerned that this is a major project if you want to undertake this, and having spent so much time at Boudin, I can tell you what it takes to manage a big piece of property. And this, acquisition and everything else. We don't want to get diverted, I don't think, on the goals that you set out for the committee on the rec park itself. I'm saying, there's a lot. We've had this rec park, which is, for me, one of the treasures, the real treasures of the town, underutilized. I think that's the fundamental point about why we came up with the rec park committee, to get this treasure back into the hands of the people and get programs there and so forth. And of course, now we have the John Werner Memorial. That's a whole other aspect. We have it's contiguous with the park itself. Is contiguous with the Yellow Barn and that 13 acres and the utilization of that. And plus, we have the Battenkill and all the trails that we could develop right along the Battenkill. All I'm just saying, to make you aware that acquiring a major piece of land like this, which I don't deny is not a bad idea, but in light of what we've got going on right now, not to have it as a diversion, which it could be.
Well, I think from our point of view on it was, we had so many people in the rec committee, such a large group, that we did break down into subcommittees, and sort of the main focus, I think, if you talk to members of the committee, was the rec director, and And so that is the priority. I think what we found, though, is because we don't have any, I mean, we're just a sort of we make recommendations. I think with the rec park, the feeling in many ways was if we can get this rec director, we work with the town to get that in place. We get a rec director. We've talked to, I've spent some time talking with Todd about working with the town group and how we facilitate that. Once we get the rec director, I think much of our feeling is they then take over much of the work at what goes on with the rec park and the planning. We will still keep a part of the committee there. I think one of the things with these public lands becomes the opportunity that is there. The Red Mountain, and we've talked about this, the Red Mountain parcel's 400 acres. It's not as large, obviously, as the other piece. The access to it is pretty simple. I think we have to cross two other pieces of property, one road that would access it. Once we had access there, it gives us one of the things we talked about, we met, it gives us access to hiking to the top of Red Mountain. You could access Flag Rock, put a trail there. And I think the sort of one of the concerns we had is this conservation fund. And if I could clear it up, the conservation fund and issues we have to look at, some of the financial and issues, and Keith probably knows this better than I do, is what would happen is that 400 acres, the conservation fund would basically purchase in many ways that would help us purchase that. It probably would come at little expense, but then we look into, okay, there's 400 acres that are no longer tax revenue for the town. How do we fix that? What monies, if possible, do we have to put into that? And I think the concern for us in many ways was with the 400 acres or the 3,000 acres in Benedict Hollow is if we don't act, that the federal government takes it or another logging company gets it, and then do we lose out on those opportunities that we could have? And I think and Nikki hit on it too. The 3,000 acres in Benedict Hollow also offer some opportunities for quite a bit of educational. Can we partner with the CDC and do some of those? Is there conservation or logging? Could they come down there? So I think it's just for us, not that it was necessarily a distraction maybe from the rec park, but because of the numbers, another opportunity. And that survey too, as she talked about, I think there was quite a bit of public interest in, is there a hiking organization in town? How do we access land? One of the things that we had a real interesting conversation is how many people talked to us and said, I know where you could go hiking or mountain biking. I go there all the time. And then when you talk to them and said, whose property is it? I don't know. Like opening up those opportunities, because in many cases people don't care if, and I think I was talking to Alan about it, people don't care if every other weekend 5 guys mountain bike but if it becomes an opportunity where we could set up a trail system, then we have to look into those.
Then those private landowners start to care.
Yeah, there's 50. So I think these are just an additional thing that we're also looking at, but definitely not a distraction from where we are at the rec park.
You had mentioned that this acquisition of land is time sensitive. Can you give me an idea of what the time frame is?
7 years?
They do not plan to hold on to the land longer than 7 years. It sounds like a long time, but the process of going through finding the proper partner to partner with and then creating that plan and then helping that partner find the funds for the money is all in that time frame.
Thank you.
There are other towns that have done remarkable things with recreation as the boost for their economy. I wish I'd brought some of those things. There have been even towns in Vermont that have used recreation and trail systems to really transform themselves. There is an $887 billion are spent nationwide on outdoor recreation. 7.6 million jobs in the United States. What percentage could also be here in Arlington, where we're bringing in money and we're bringing in jobs and we're bringing in families that want to live here because we have an awesome school, because we have great things to do on the weekend, and this is just another asset to look at.
So it's kind of interesting for me that, I'm not cutting you off, am I? I hope I didn't cut you off. Because I have a habit of doing that. It's kind of interesting to me because I was talking with some folks about this, that the recreation piece took up the biggest piece of the conversation tonight. And at town meeting this year, the floor meeting, Keith, I think probably half the meeting was focused on recreation. And I think when Hooper told me that they got 200 responses back, I don't know how many people have done surveys before. That's a big deal. 200 surveys in a town like that, responses, that shows a very deep interest in recreation. So I just tell you, my prior job working in DC, I worked for an organization that was in 150 different countries. And we would do surveying and send out 200,000 surveys. We'd be lucky to get 100 back. I'm serious. Getting 200 surveys back speaks very clearly to the interest of recreation in this town. So I say that when Hooper kind of briefed us on this conversation, and I'm not speaking, David, for you or Hooper, for anybody else on the committee back here, anybody else. I don't think anybody's saying, hey, Keith, can you open up a checkbook today and cut a check? We want to buy that 400 acres. I think what we're saying is, in this bigger conversation, that recreation presents an opportunity in this town to generate an enormous amount of revenue for the town. That's what we're saying. And so is that the possibility? And it's a big picture thing. And, I'll make sure I stay on Hooper to stay focused on what the priorities are. But this bigger conversation about where does this fit into economic development, this is worth, to me, having the conversation. That's all I'm saying, right? David?
I'd just like to add, I wasn't here back in the early 70s when the rec park started. That was a piece of pasture land, and somebody had a vision at that time. And this community came together and built that into what it is today. So this is just an extension of this. Yes, it's a big piece, it's a big bite. Long term, does it make sense?
Right. I think and where does it fit into the economic piece? So when Keith and I chatted yesterday, Hooper touched on some of this. Okay, does it come off the tax revenue? If the town got involved in it, does it pick up liability issues? Right? But I don't think, if I'm saying something that after you've had conversations with conservation, please correct me. We're not saying the only option is for the town to buy it.
Right.
There's an option for other people to invest in it and allow the use of it for recreational purposes. And that could be an economic driver in town. And I'll say it again, to get 200 surveys back, that is a big deal. Victoria, you're kind of shaking your head because I know the collaborative does.
It's amazing.
I know you do surveying all the time.
We do a community survey and to get 200 surveys, I'm envious.
Yeah. If you got 50 or 75 back, and again, half the town meeting was spent on recreation. So, collaboration for the greater good about the economic piece. What are the potential economic drivers in town that can drive people into the town? And again, to go back to this point about, and I know people may get sick of hearing me talk about Rutland, but I bet you people would be surprised to hear that inside the city boundaries of Rutland is Pine Hill Park. And so when I became the police chief up there, people told me about this Pine Hill Park. And it kind of sits in a neighborhood where it can be a little shaky at times. And that park probably brings bikers, mountain bikers from all over the Northeast into the city on a given weekend. And it's a revenue generator that I didn't recognize because the first time someone's car got broken in there and I heard about it, it becomes a priority for public safety to protect the people that come into the community to spend money. So again, that bigger conversation about what are our potential economic drivers. So, we had committee reports. right? Chair's report out. Anything else on committee report outs that you want to speak to or follow up on a conversation? I want to reemphasize, one of the things when I agreed to do this with Don and Flo is that, you know, and I think I said this before about ideas that came forward in Rutland. Any idea is worth having a conversation about because you never know where it's going to lead, right? So no idea is a stupid idea. That's not real sophisticated, right? No idea is not a stupid idea. Other questions, comments, or challenges? Yes.
Just make a comment. Two things. One, you made reference to losing John Warner, losing a huge piece of thread of what Arlington is. I believe that's absolutely true, but I also want to encourage people and remind people that he touched so many lives and lives on in our youth. My daughter came home from college. We spent a good portion of the morning just chatting about her memories and the impact he had on her and how she will now, it's her duty and her job to give back and to continue that legacy. So yes, absolutely a hole in our hearts, but the legacy he's left I think will live on for a very, very long time. And I just want to remind people, you know, when we look around this room and the ages of the folks here, and that we have so many youth that want to come back to this place that they love so dearly. And the reason I'm here is hoping that we can give those children the opportunity to come back, create housing that's affordable, create jobs that help pay off college tuition, which Lord knows I can't pay it all. You know, I'm just really excited about this, and thank you all. Thank you.
Kate, Todd, I know you got a point. Kate, because I forgot to mention this too. You and I had a conversation yesterday about the clinic, the health center, potentially helping locate a grant to fund the rec director, right? Because we're not looking, again, these conversations, I know it scares Keith a little bit to think about. We may be saying we're looking for town funds, and I talked to Keith about this yesterday. There's other opportunities out there to potentially fund this stuff and how we do go about doing it. But I'll say it again, when you have that much interest in town about recreation, it's important to listen to what people are saying.
And I think it's just a collaboration. You know, I worked with Dave on creating a letter of support for the rec park, you know, on behalf of the health center to say, our patients, this gives them an opportunity to, when our docs say, you know, you have to walk more, you have to do some more exercise, that it gives them a safe environment to do so. And so, of course, we're ready to partner in any way we can. You know, we're also looking to support ourselves, so you know, trying to figure out how we can best work with each other and how our strengths can help others. So, yeah, absolutely.
Thanks. Ty.
Well, my piece was on the rec director and how huge that is, also for the youth sports. You know, I currently serve as the vice president of the Arlington Soccer Club. I have been the president of the Arlington Youth Basketball Club, Katie's McBrain, the Little League program. You know, you work so hard at these things, and with volunteerism is getting lower. I mean, my Arlington Soccer group, on my committee, I think two of the people on it have kids that are still in youth league. So that group is leaving, and getting new people is tough. And we're at that point now where we need a rec director that's going to support all of those pieces. They are ways to bring in revenue, but they're also ways to carry on things that like John Warner started and keep this program going and sustained, and all those pieces that rec director, I think, is a tremendous and huge part of this community moving forward.
You know, and I think, Todd, I think the danger, Keith and I talked about this yesterday, and Keith put it in this, and Keith, if I'm speaking for you, please speak up, but the balance in Keith's mind is that what would you lose if you don't have coordination, right? So, for example, if we lost the soccer program because people didn't step up to do that in John's absence, then that's a huge loss to this town. People come to this town to participate in the youth soccer program and the history of that. So I think this is worth the conversation we need to follow up on and sort out the funding. And I talked to Hooper before the meeting based on a conversation with Kate and you and a couple other folks. I think I have some ideas on how to string some money together that can maybe get us off the ground, and then figure out a way to sustain it. And so we'll move forward on that. Other comments, questions, feedback? Okay. This is an incredible thing for Jim Baker. It's 8:03. And, Jim Baker has never, ever, in his complete professional adult life, ran a meeting that ended on time. But we're doing it today. Okay? I want to say it again. Thank you so much for coming out on a night like this and continuing this activity. It's important.